So, last couple of weeks, Job is a heavy book, okay? If you know the story of Job at all, it is not chipper, okay? And it's also very different from what we've done in the past because it's not necessarily a straight teaching, okay? So like when Paul writes a letter to a church, he's generally trying to teach them something. He's going to talk about doctrine. He's going to talk about the ways that we live our lives and how Christ would have us to live and all of those things. Job is not like that. Job is a story, okay? Job is an account, a historical account of a man named Job and what happens in his life. And essentially, if you know the story, he loses everything in the course of a day. Okay, everything being 10 children and then riches that we can't even understand. Okay, all in the course of a day. And the reason is because God allows it to happen. Okay, God allows it to happen. We even find out as God talks with Satan that God for the first part of Job's life and up until that one day, God had been protecting Job and been flourishing Job and been blessing Job until this one day happens and he allows Satan to do work on Job. Okay? So we've asked a lot of questions, a lot of really hard questions, a lot of questions that honestly we didn't fully answer, but in the end we have hope because of what Job experiences at the end, in that he gets to see God face to face. He says that I had heard of you through the ears. So I just heard of you, and I heard about you and heard some things of you, but now after going through all that Job goes through, all the grief, all of the pain, all of the suffering, he can say, I've seen you now with my eyes. Okay, and so even though there are some hard questions that come up in Job, there's some hard questions that we have to ask ourselves as we look at our lives, as we look at the world around us. There's some hard questions, and we may not get the fullness of the answer that maybe we want, or we may not see all the reasons or all the steps that lead to that answer. But the answer ultimately that we know, that we see in Job, is that God does these things. God allows suffering. God allows these things so that we can know Him in a deeper way. So that we can see Him with our eyes instead of just hear about Him. We can experience God in a deep way, because there's an experience of God that happens in suffering that doesn't happen anywhere else. Okay? It doesn't happen anywhere else. Now, we've got 2 more weeks of just kind of floating through Job chapters 1 through 3. Okay? And then we're going to really pick things up as we go through the arguments of his friends. But before we do that, okay, so we've got this week and then we've got next week. And then the week after that, we're going to do a question and answer time. Okay, a question and answer time. So what I'm going to ask of you guys is that you text me your questions or Facebook me your questions or do whatever. And we're doing that for 2 reasons. One, that gives us the questions in advance so we can kind of attack things maybe in categorical order. If there are similar questions that we can kind of crunch into one answer, it makes it a lot easier to do that. But secondly, we don't want we want to do the texting thing just in case maybe some of y'all aren't comfortable asking a certain question in a public place. Okay, so we want to kind of give you a little bit more privacy because we know we don't want y'all to feel like you look stupid, or if that's the kind of pressure that you feel in asking questions. I know some of you don't have that. Some of you I wish you had that, but. So we're going to do it that way, okay? And here's the deal, okay? Because we are going to plan this, because we are going to announce this to you. If I don't get questions, then what we're going to do then is I'm going to ask you questions, okay? So that's a lot of fun for me. But I don't know that's necessarily the route we want to go, okay? So make sure that you guys are thinking of questions. As you're thinking of questions, either write them down or just go ahead and just text them to me. Okay, and maybe put Q&A and then write your question. Text me your question, and I'll log that away for 2 weeks from today. Wednesday night, we're going to do that. Okay, we're just going to have a question and answer time. Things about Scripture, about the Christian life, about God, about the way things work. Don't go find something like in the Old Testament, like why did the goats breed speckled for Jacob and everything. Not that kind of stuff is not what we're going to be talking about. Okay, more just kind of how we walk these things out, and especially how we answer really difficult questions about God, especially maybe even ones that we've covered already a little bit in Job. Okay, all right. So we talked about that kind of week 1, just kind of answering certain questions, talking about our focus needs to be on God and His glory, and not on Job himself. And so last week, what we did, we just talked about Job. Okay, and in Job, God and the narrator himself called Job blameless and upright. Okay, so we talked about how Job got those, how Job got to be blameless and upright. We talked about this thing called predestination, that God chose Job from the beginning, from the foundation of the world, as it says in Ephesians, which we read. The foundations of the world, God chose Job and saved Job to make him upright by the blood of the cross Christ. That's the way it works. Okay? So we talked about a lot of that last week. And again, here tonight and tomorrow, I'll get those posted on YouTube, and you guys that maybe have missed, and you want to go back and watch those, you can do that. Okay? So now what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to look a little bit more at Job, but we're going to also kind of just bring it maybe to our level just a little bit. We're going to kind of apply some things to us, and maybe bring this into a little more focus for us. Okay? So here we go. Job chapter 3. Okay? And we're going to start in verse 1. So this is after all the catastrophe has happened to Job. He's been mourning for a few days. I'm trying to remember, for a week he's been on the ground, cutting the sores that are on his body now because of the sickness that he has been inflicted with by the devil. And so he's been doing this for a week, and he has 3 friends with him who are also there mourning with him. They haven't been saying anything because, what do you say to a guy who's just lost everything? Okay? So they've just kind of been waiting for Job to kind of snap out of it a little bit, and maybe then they can address some things in Job. And so Job breaks the silence first, and he starts like this. Okay, so this is Job chapter 3, verse 1. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light, but have none, nor see the eyelids of the morning, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes." Okay. Like I said, this is a real chipper book. Okay, this is Job's lament. Okay, this is Job crying against the day of his birth. How many of you guys like birthdays? You like birthdays? Everybody like birthdays? Wendy, you don't like birthdays? Not a big fan, huh?
Not really.
Fair enough. Okay, so in general, okay, we like birthdays. Okay, this is Job's lament of his birth. Okay, so this is a very different feel. But I want us to just remind us again what Job has gone through. Job had tremendous wealth, and it was all taken from him. It was all stolen from him. Okay, there were raiders that came, took everything. Okay, so imagine. Have you guys ever lost something really precious to you? Something valuable, whether it was a lot of money or whether it was something you've lost something. Okay, that was really okay. How did you feel?
Terrible.
Awful, right? You just felt awful. Okay. Now, I don't know. To me, I lose something and it's usually a big deal. Like there was one time I lost my iPod. Right? You guys ever lost? You done that? Okay, you lost that. Now, iPod, $200 back when I lost it. They were like $200, right? Okay, and so I lost something worth $200. And that was a big deal. I was like, I lost my iPod. I got to go pay another $200 to get an iPod. Right? Okay, so that was just one of those things. There was also another time. You got a question or something?
I got something for now.
What?
Mr. Daniels, he passed away.
That's right. Oh, that guy, your neighbor, right? Sorry to
Passed
hear
away.
Sorry to hear that. That's rough.
And now they're moving to Canada.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. So there was another time. Okay, so that was something where I just lost it. Okay, I just lost it, and that's really frustrating. There was another time that I was out. I was coaching a basketball team at the time. I was out. I left my car back at our school, and as a teacher, administrator, and a coach at a little school. And so I left it in the parking. I left my car in the parking lot. I left several of my bags in the back because I didn't want to haul them to the game and back and different things. Okay, so I get back that night, and somebody broke into my car. Okay, so I broke into my car. They stole my wallet. They stole my book bags, which had several of my books, which weren't any consequence, but journals that I had written in, done quite a bit of writing in that I really meant a lot to me. Okay, and that was another level of distress. Okay, to have something taken from you, okay, to be violated in that way is a big deal. Okay, And so there's a level there of just you're angry and you're a little bit worried because you don't know if you can ever trust this place again. There's a lot of different things. Okay, so all those emotions just kind of run through us. So, and some of us have been through varying degrees of that. Okay, maybe you've never had anything stolen from you, or maybe you have, and you know the frustrations that come with that. Okay, so Job has riches beyond what we can even imagine. Okay, so as we've lost iPods or cell phones or had things stolen from us, okay, I mean, if we can try just for a second, just trying to get into Job's shoes for a second, I mean, he lost way more than that. Okay, he lost so much more. Okay, not only that, but then his 10 children. Okay, and this is something that I guess we're not going to have children so far, but there's a different level of relationship between a parent and their child. Okay, and so to lose a child, okay, is just, for me, it's unfathomable. I can't even imagine. All right, and for me to lose one of my, I can't even imagine losing one of my girls. Okay, so Job has lost all his, they've been stolen from him. He's been violated, and then on top of that, he has 10 kids that he loved dearly and had sacrificed dearly for, and cared deeply for them enough to sacrifice on their behalf every day to make sure that they were right with God. Okay, that's a level of love that we don't see sometimes in parents. Okay, it's a level of devotion, not only to them but also to God. And so Job, all in the course of one day, everything's stolen from him, and then his 10 children whom he loved deeply are dead. Are dead. Okay. So, I don't know if you've ever had a day where you just ask yourself this, you ask yourself this really silly question: why was I even born? Or you go the other, or maybe you've said this: I wish I could just die. Anybody you ever had that day? Okay, and you've actually said that to yourself, right? Okay, all right, okay. Here's kind of where I'm going with this. We haven't even come close to touching the type of grief that Job is going through, and yet we still ask this question. No, we still have those feelings. Most of us in here have never even, the roughest day that we've had is maybe got a bad grade on a test, or we got a flat tire on the way to something, and that was the hardest day that we've had. Some of us. Others of us, there have been different things. I'm not trying to make light of anybody's life at all, but compared to what Job has lost in a single day, none of us have anything to compare. And yet we still find ourselves, just like Job here, lamenting the day of our birth. Now, up until this point, the text has been very clear that Job, in his reaction to the tragedy, had not sinned. Okay, so he worships God, he even blesses God. Okay, for the fact that these things have happened. He said, "The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Okay. Now if we can just think of that for a second and just dwell on that, that is a tremendous amount of faith, isn't it? That's a tremendous amount of understanding. That's a level that we don't even walk in. Okay. And I'm going to talk about how that's shameful for us, essentially. Okay. But what I want to do is I want us to just look for just a second at Job's perspective, okay? And I want to talk about why Job wanders into some sin in his lament. Okay? Why Job has now, the shift has gone from Job kind of being this upright guy to reacting correctly. And now as we read the rest of Job and how Job talks with his friends, we're going to see some of Job's sin come out. Okay? We're going to see him wrestle with things and ask questions that are really coming from a sin. And we're going to talk about why those things are sinful and why, ultimately, we tend to do those things. Why we tend to land there as well. Okay? So here we go. We're going to talk about some of Job's limitations. In Job's perspective, Job is limited in scope. Okay? Job is limited in scope. So if we can look at it this way. I don't know if you guys remember what we did with Matt Chandler and his explicit gospel stuff. But he used an illustration where if we just kind of rolled you guys in one at a time and showed you like 2 seconds of a 3-hour movie, would you really be able to know what that movie was about? Okay? And he uses it to just show how limited our scope is. Okay, so imagine this. Imagine another way to describe the same point, another illustration to use. Imagine that there's a painting, there's a picture, okay, that stretches for miles. Okay, there's a picture, in its fullness, it's beautiful, it's got but there's a lot in it, and you are standing right up close. It's right here, and that's all you can see. Are you seeing the fullness of that picture? Are you even close to seeing the fullness of it? If it stretches for miles and you're standing right next to it, are you gonna be able to tell what that picture is? No. Okay, that essentially is our limitation of scope. We have no way of seeing the big picture, do we? No way. We've seen a millisecond of a 3-hour movie, and so we believe that somehow we have the fullness of the entirety of the story, of the plot of the, okay, or we believe that in our little segment that we can see of the painting that stretches for miles, that we somehow are the full. And this is Job's limit. This is part of Job's limit, is that Job is so limited in his scope, but he believes that somehow he has received the greater picture. Okay. So Job, in his limited scope, not believing it to be limited, says it would have been better, get this, it would have been better if I had never been born or had died before this day than to endure this. Okay, so you hear that there? Okay, because before Job had talked about how great God was to be able to give and to take away, and that blessed be the name of the Lord, and all these different things. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The name of the Lord be praised. These are the words that first come out of Job's mouth. But now he's had time to think now, and as he's speaking, he doesn't believe now that God's plan was perfect from the day. He believes that he shouldn't have ever been born. Okay, so Job has not only believed that he has the fullness of the picture, even though his scope is so limited, he also believes that he has a better view of it than God did. Okay. I don't know where you guys are in life. Okay. I don't know how much you like your life now or don't like your life. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but there have been several times in my life that I've posed the question, God, why am I even here? Right? Okay. Or, this is a fun one too. God, you really shouldn't have done this because it would have been better if I had stayed. So let me tell you a couple of times this has happened in my life. 10 years old, grew up in California. I loved California. There were mountains, there was beach. It was awesome. Okay. The weather rarely got 90, 95 is kind of as high as it would get. Not like here where you 350 degrees. And so, but 10 years old, my dad decides to move our family, to Texas. Okay, which Texas compared to California, Texas is flat. Okay, and Galveston is not a beach. It's just not. Okay, no, it's not. So you can imagine as a 10-year-old kid, I really struggled with the fact that my family now was living in Texas, okay, and we had moved from a pretty nice house with a pool to a little, what do you call it? It was a little pastor's house for the church that my dad was now working for. Parsonage, there it is. I was going to say patronage, but I was like, parsonage. Okay, so a little parsonage, not far from the church, but it was a 2-bedroom house. I'm one of 5 kids. We have pets. And within like the first several months of us living there, we get infested with fleas. Okay, so it was not an easy transition, okay, for us and our family from California, beautiful, lovely California. I could see the mountains on the horizon. We could go to the beach pretty easily. We had a pool at our house to now living in a 2-bedroom parsonage with fleas. Okay, so that was one instance in my life where I was just like, okay, God, you messed something up. Okay? You messed something up. Okay? There are others, but for the sake of time, we're just going to stick with that. Okay, so are we beginning to relate a little bit with Job? A little bit? I mean, has there ever been a time in your life where you asked those same things, like, God, there's something wrong here? Okay, there's something wrong with what's going on. You need to fix this. You did something wrong. This is not the way it was supposed to go. This is not the way I dreamed it up. I wasn't supposed to be in Godley or Granbury or Cleburne. This is not where I was supposed to end up. I'm not supposed to be going to this cruddy school. I'm not supposed to be, I'm supposed to have better friends than this. I'm supposed to have a job and more money right now. Why doesn't my mom or dad have a better job? Have we ever asked these questions? Have we ever looked at somebody else's life and been like, that's what it should be for me? Have we done that? Yeah? Can we be honest? We done that? Sure. Okay? This is where Job, but what I want us to see in relation to how, yes, we might relate with Job with that. But when we do that, we prove how limited our scope is. That we don't see the big picture. Okay, another limitation. He was limited by several things. Okay? He was limited by several things. He was limited in actual understanding. Okay? Actual understanding. So again, that's related back to the scope. We're going to jump to a couple of things that he was limited. He was limited by time. Okay, Job, we're not exactly sure exactly how Job was. He had 10 kids. So he probably was somewhere around the 60 to 80 range, maybe around that. But that's not a long time. Okay? It's not a long time. He might have been a little bit older than that, but when you think about that in the span of what we know now, okay, that's not a lot of time, right? It's not a lot of time, okay? Again, this goes back to the limited scope, but at the same time, he was limited by time. There hadn't been much. He's limited by experience, okay? Job lived in a time where he probably didn't know that the world was round. He probably didn't know that we circled the sun. He probably didn't know a lot of things. He was limited by his experience, okay? He had probably never been across an ocean or maybe even across the Mediterranean, okay? So there's a lot of things that Job was limited by, okay? A lot of things that Job was limited by. He was limited by pain, okay? Limited by pain. I don't know if you've ever experienced grief or just a tremendous amount of pain, but if you've been in pain, and Chloe maybe can write this right now with her shin splints. Okay, when you're in pain, you tend to focus on it, don't you? Like I'm not talking about you've got a little scratch on your arm or whatever, but when you have real pain that lingers and that doesn't really go away, you tend to focus on it, right? Okay, I've had shin splints, and listen, every time you take a step, you feel it. Okay. I've been in a car accident where my back was thrown way out of whack. Okay, every time you take a step, every time you sit down, every time you move a certain way, you feel it. I've ripped this muscle here in my chest. Okay, in a bike accident, every time you breathe, you feel it. Okay, and you tend to focus on that. Job has a disease in his body. Okay, where boils just show up on his body. And I don't know if you've ever had boils, but those things are not fun. Okay? It's like a big blister almost, but the flesh usually is disintegrating. It's just kind of rotting. Okay, it's really gross. But that's what Job. Okay, so Job is limited. Okay, by his pain, right? Because it's hard for him to see outside of what is just going on with him. Okay. He's limited by that. He's also limited by revelation. Okay, he's limited by revelation. And what I mean by that, Job doesn't have a church to go to. Okay, Job didn't have a Bible to sit and read. Job didn't have. Job was limited by revelation. Okay? His knowledge of God was passed on by word of mouth. Okay? This was before God really sent a lot of prophets. This is before the law. This is before a lot of things that would come later that would really reveal God. This is before the people of Israel are established. And so the knowledge of God was really passed down from generation to generation. We're going to see that as his friends start to argue with Job. Okay, we're going to see they're going to pull a lot from oral tradition and different things that have been passed down. Okay, but Job was limited in that because all he had was what other men had been through maybe ages before, and then what he had then experienced in his short lifetime. We already said that he's limited by time and scope. Okay, so he's limited by revelation. Okay, and all of this is what I need us to hear now. All of this attributed to Job then walking into sin after his suffering. Okay? All of this led Job into asking questions and even almost accusing God of things in sin, in Job's sin. Why? Because he was limited and didn't understand his own limitations. So what we need tonight, okay, what we need, honestly, all the time, is we need to understand these limitations in us. Okay? We need to understand these limitations in us. Okay? So where we are like Job, and listen, Job receives some grace from God. Okay, he received a lot of grace from God. Okay, but Job receives grace from God in certain ways that we do as well. Okay, so God understands. Okay, so this is some places that we're going to kind of be able to relate with Job, and then we're going to talk about some places where honestly we need to wake up to the fact that we really are getting a lot more grace than we deserve. Okay, so we're limited by scope just as Job is, aren't we? Aren't we? You're limited by scope. Okay, most of you barely know what's going on in your own life, much less the lives of others immediately around you, much less the lives of others around the world. You follow me? We are extremely limited in scope. Okay, no matter what Google will tell you, or even what our culture will tell you, that this world is flattening out or becoming smaller or whatever because of so much information, that means nothing in being limited and understanding the true full scope of everything that happens within the lives of human beings. So something we need to agree with things that happen and accept the grace of God, that even in our limitations, He still gives us grace and love and hope and all of these things. We need to understand our limitation of our scope. Okay? So here's where this plays out for you. Okay? Here's where this plays out for you. Okay, we talk about this one a lot. Okay? In your obedience to your parents, this plays out. Okay, because here's what I remember about being a teenager. Rules that my parents would make, okay, would make no sense to me and therefore did not need to be followed. Anybody relate to that? Don't play chance. Get your hand up. Okay. Now, so here's what you're doing. Here's what we do as teenagers. Okay, is we pit our 14 to 15 years of experience and maturity against maybe 30 to 40 years of experience and maturity, and believe that we have more understanding than the 30 to 40 years. Got that? Now, does that seem a little bit ridiculous to you? Just hearing it sound like that. I don't care how you feel about you and your parents and how much smarter you are than your parents and all that stuff you believe. Does that sound a little bit ridiculous? That you would believe that 12 to 18 years of experience trumps 40 years of experience? Does that sound a little bit ridiculous? Okay. Now, Job isn't arguing with his parents, is he? Okay, Job doesn't have a problem with his parents. Job has a problem with God and how God did. Okay, so let's think about it. So this is Job talking, maybe an 80-year-old man questioning an eternal God. Okay, and that's Job. He's got 70 plus years on y'all. Now, so this is really, now I want you to hear me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. And whenever I want eyes on me, okay? This is what you do whenever you question your parents in reality. We've just talked about the human relationship. This is what you're doing in reality. You, a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old child, let's be real, are questioning an eternal God as to how He set up a family to be. Okay? That's the reality. Job here has 70 plus, but even in comparison to God's eternal nature, makes it look even more ridiculous. You are limited in scope, vastly limited in scope compared to God. How God set things to be is the way it ought to be. Children obey parents. You have nothing in regards to scope compared to your parents, much less an eternal God. Now listen, I'm not trying to say that your parents are right all the time. Okay? Parents are human. Okay? But that's not the issue. That's not the heart issue. That's not the heart attitude that's being dealt with. You are limited in scope. We are limited in actual understanding, just like Job. We don't fully see exactly how our actions will play out. Chance and I were having a conversation in the car today, and he talked about how he wasn't going to play football this year because it really had no real bearing on his life, on his career. He doesn't want to play football. He don't want to even be in athletics or anything like that. Okay, and so for how old are you, Chance?
14.
Okay, 40. For a 14-year-old boy, that makes complete sense. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Okay. But here's what I know after enduring 4 years of football, is that there are aspects of football that discipline you for anything you do. Pushing through when things get hard, when you're tired, when you can't give anything, and being able to mentally and even at times physically overcome certain things through the game of football. Okay, now listen, I'm not trying to say that Chance should go play football. That's not what I'm trying to say. Chance, do whatever he wants with his life. Football really doesn't. But here's what I know by my experience and actual understanding of the sport of football, now not being a football player. There are things that I still pull back on and look back on and am thankful for that I learned playing football. That pay dividends for me now, even though my life has nothing to do with football now. Okay, and there's 15 years between me and Chance, and my actual understanding of the game of football and the benefits of it and all these different things is so much greater than what his is right now as a 14-year-old. Imagine the scope of me to God. An actual understanding. Okay. Again, experience, time, pain, all of these things. We could do the similar illustrations with all of these. Okay, and this is where we receive grace. Okay. This is where we receive grace, and this is where, listen, you are going to fight these things your entire life. You're going to fight your limited scope. You're going to fight your limited experience. Because here's what you're going to do. Okay, everybody look at it. Okay, because you need to hear this so that maybe, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but maybe in the future, maybe you can catch yourself doing these things. Because what you're going to do is the older that you get, the more scope and experience you're going to believe you have to be able to talk to God about the things that need to go on in your life. That's the way it works. You get into college and that head just grows even more. Then you get a career and you start becoming self-sufficient, and that head grows even more, and you believe yourself to be even more greater than God than you do even right now. And I'm speaking from experience here. We don't ever get to finish dealing with these things. Okay, but again, well, I want to draw us back to, even though I need you to hear that, but I want to try, we receive grace for these things. God was gracious to Job. God is gracious to us. In the matters where we defy Him, despite our limitations. And there will be times, folks, listen to me. There will be times that God uses suffering to show you your limitations. You may not be like Job. You may not lose all your money and lose all your kids. And just be left with a nagging wife and 3 lousy friends. That may not be your life. But there have been specific times where God has done this in my life. I had a car wreck. Okay, I suffered through depression. I had to drop out of school. Okay, lost my job. Lost everything for a time. And I didn't have people necessarily die, but in that time, God will use suffering to show you your limitations. Okay, now, I want to press on you with this next one, with this last one, as we finish up. Okay, because a place where Job was limited was in Revelation, is an excuse that you don't have. Everybody have one of these at home? You have one of these accessible to you? Yes? Yeah? Everybody has one of these at home. What does this reveal? What? God. This is God's revelation to us, to mankind. Yeah? Okay. So, if we need to know about how you, as teenagers, should relate to your parents, is it in here? Okay, as you, as Christians, how you follow God and how you obey Him, is that in here? Why God chooses suffering in the lives of His people, is that in here? Is that in here? Yeah. Your limitations, are those in here? Yes. God's amazing grace, is that in here? See, Job didn't have a scripture to go to. Job, honestly, in some respects, could claim a little bit of ignorance to why God would use suffering in the life of somebody that he loved and that had been obedient to Him. You don't have that excuse. You might have that reason. You may very well be ignorant. You may very well be ignorant to a lot of things in regards to God, but you don't have that excuse. You follow me? See, some of you in here, you don't ask questions because you don't want to know answers. You choose, in the way that you live, you just choose not to ask the question, why does that happen, or why do these things happen? Some of you do ask those questions, but instead of coming to this for the answer, you instead just sit and you kind of dream with all of your massive amounts of wisdom and understanding in Google, and you find your own answers. Okay? The limitation of revelation is not applicable to us. Why? Because you're holding it in your lap right now. God has revealed himself here. This is not age limited. You don't just get to understand this as you get to be 21, 22 years old. So I want to challenge you again, because listen, here's what I know is coming for most of you in the next couple weeks. You're going to go back to school. You're going to go back to your group of friends. You're going to go back to that way of life, and everything about you will change. You'll be more stressed. You'll be busier. You'll be more tired. You'll be more spread. You'll be more this and that. I mean, we could name a million different things that will happen to you, that will rush upon you in a couple of weeks. And you know what you'll be left to lean on? Your limitations. You'll be left to lean on your limited scope. You'll be left to lean on your limited understanding. You'll be limited by pain. You'll be limited by distractions. You'll be limited by so many other things. And that's what you'll have to fall back on. If maybe this year some form of suffering comes for you. Always here, we've always encouraged you, we've always asked, we've begged you to be in your word. Listen, that doesn't get anything for us. I don't get a raise if I can get everybody here to read their Bible. I don't do that because I need to be able to check off my list that I got 12 to 15 students to read their Bible every day, and I can put that on a resume and find a better job. We encourage you in that because here's what we know. Here's what I know. That if you continue to lean on your limited understanding, on your limited scope, you continue to lean on your limitations, you will fall. And the end of that fall, if God doesn't catch you, is hell. The end of that fall, you leaning on your own understanding is hell. So I want to invite you into grace tonight. I want to, again, point you to God's Word. Now listen. You may be thinking in your head, I've tried that before and it just didn't work. You may be thinking to yourself, I've tried it and I didn't understand it. You may be thinking to yourself, I've tried it and it just gets so boring. It just gets so tiring. I just get so busy. And listen, I hear you. I've been there. But this is it. This is grace extended to you. And so hear me tonight. I want everybody to look at me. If you don't have one of these, if you don't have a Bible, we will get you one. If you have trouble, okay, like you don't know where to start. You're like, do I start in Genesis? And that's gets into some really weird stuff, and then we get to Leviticus, and I really don't like that. Do I start in Matthew? If you don't know where to start, just talk to me, okay? I follow a plan, okay? I follow a plan that tells me what to read every day. And there are hundreds, dozens of plans out there. So I completely understand. I needed that to really, because my mind just gets so scattered. It's like, okay, what am I going to read today? And then I just don't around to do it, right? Okay, so if you need a plan, we'll find you a plan that works for you. Okay. We'll start you in a place that you can understand. And then listen, hey, this is what you need to hear more than anything. When it gets hard to understand, that's when you ask questions. That's not where you stop and never start again. That's why I'm here. That's why Deborah's here. That's why Amy's here. That's why Brandy and Paul are here. We would love to help answer questions for you. So I want to ask you, I'm going to invite you into grace tonight. Because listen, this is grace to you. God didn't have to reveal himself. Hey, God is about the glory of his name. And listen, God is glorified by people going to hell because they disobeyed him. We talk about that all the time in here. God didn't have to do this. This is grace extended to you. To help you in your time of need. To help you where you are limited. And listen, I know you may not feel it. You may not even understand it. But you are extremely limited. You want to know how I know that? It's because God has shown me my limitations. Not that I'm necessarily any better than any of you in this room. But here's what I know. We're all human. So you know what that means? We all are limited. We're limited in scope. We're limited in understanding. We all need help. We all need grace. And that's what is being extended to you. Look at me. That's what is being extended to you in God giving you his word. So don't neglect it. Don't tell yourself now that you've got, 2 days till whenever and band until whenever and you got this amount of freedom. Don't tell me you don't have time. Because listen, you make time for a million other things. This is grace extended to you. Don't neglect it. Don't lean on your own limitations.